just over there right now relative to what we're dealing with in the United States. Obviously, globalization plays a major role in all of this. And I also wanted, as a second point, since we were talking about gender, I was thinking about staying on this kind of theme about, like social formations. Maybe what you would want to also speak to is the question of higher education. What the differences are relative to the university systems in France, relative to what we have here. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I also saw somewhere very recently, and this was with reference specifically to France, that outside of the United States, well, there were a couple of numbers that really jumped out. As far as university graduates go, and I guess what they were referencing here would be not like going to a community college or something like that, but a four-year degree somewhere. Outside of the United States, the highest level of unemployed university graduates could be found in France. And then there was also another reference made to French students, and I'm trying to think exactly what that point was, and I've just completely lost it right at this moment. But I'm going to step away from the mic and let you just address those 2 points or questions that I had or comments, and I'll come back in a second.
Well, I take these questions really to be how does the United States and France look alike and look differently, given a lot of similarities, advanced industrialized countries, high unemployment, and the like. Well, here's how they look very different, which is why the comparisons may not seem obvious. Right now, France is in the throes of a large-scale, massive social upheaval around the defense of social programs that were hard-won and dearly appreciated. And in the United States, there's similar things happening without the protest. Take the question, though, of the deficit, which is a really big thing. Wasn't it the deficits that determined the outcome of the elections a few weeks ago in the United States? Supposedly. Well, in France, not only in France, but in all the countries that are affiliated with the European Union, there are laws in which how much budget deficits, this is inscribed in the law of the European Union, how much of a budget deficit they can have. And so when they go over that, they attack, surprise, surprise, the right-wing governments particularly attack social welfare programs. So this is the meaning of the struggles in Greece and in France right now. It's really driven by these rules around, these laws around deficits. They also have another similar problem with the retirement and Social Security, something we have. They have aging populations. And so the current structure and financing for these systems is based on those in the labor force and those aren't. And with aging populations, that puts a strain on the system. Well, if your imagination doesn't go any further than that, then obviously the retirement age has to be raised or the cuts have to be instituted into payments. But the French labor unions have a different idea, and that different idea is maybe the rich should pay. Maybe there should be a much more steeply graduated income tax. Maybe there's other ways to pay for people's retirement. Also, the university students have been slow. This is one of the parallels that doesn't work so far with May 68. They've been slow to get involved, but high school students, perhaps surprisingly, have been involved with this. And their argument for getting involved with this is that it may be 40 or 50 years away, but eventually they're going to have their own questions of retirement, and when they get out of high school or any other type of college, university, or professional school, they're going to be faced with higher unemployment and a strain on the employment, because if workers that are in the system have to work 2 more years, there's obviously going to be a lot less jobs available. So there is lots and lots of parallels. The big thing we don't have yet is that these are, in France and in Greece, these questions are being played out and decided in the streets, and in the United States it's still become a question of talk shows, elections, in which the real issues really aren't debated, and the popular sentiments of defense of social struggles aren't being represented. And that, of course, is the big question that separates the U.S. from many other advanced industrialized countries, France included, and that is that there is no political party based on the organized strength of labor in this country. So all the militant action, all the progressive energy tends to go into lesser evil politics. So there is this is what I'm getting from your question, Robert, that there's some very, very sharp and very close parallels between the European and the US situation, but the biggest difference is that we still haven't seen big class struggles, big mobilizations over these. I heard on a talk show Senator Warner the other day saying, well, we're going to have to raise the retirement age here in the United States. Well, if that happens, well, we'll see what happens then.
That question came to me, the other part of that was with regards to the students outside of the United States, and this we're talking about higher education in France. I believe France had fewer students actually completing their degrees other than the United, it was the largest percentage other than the United States. And Eric and I had a discussion with him before today's event here, and this is one of the things that I was going to ask you because we weren't really clear on the answer about. Regarding the university system in France, is it an open enrollment system there? I mean, in other words, anybody can basically go to school. Is that true, or?
Not exactly. When we compare university rates, it's a little bit skewed, and here's why. The United States graduates about 30% of its population. That's to say about 30% of the adult population in the United States has finished college. It's by far the highest in the world, which is unusual given the fact that we have the largest inequality. The gap between rich and poor in this country is so great. It's much greater than any other industrialized country. Well, part of the answer to the riddle is that it's not such a riddle after all, because countries like Germany, England, and France that have maybe between 10 and 20% of the population going to college, they have professional schools. So many of the people going to, say, a business school would have been in a university here.
Okay.
I'm not sure about what percentage are finishing or not, but this is another parallel with the current event, and I'm glad you brought this up. In 1995, the French government tried to institute what would have been for the students a very harmful university reform. And that reform was opposed in the streets by major demonstrations, and the government, and this is what the strikers are pointing to today, did cede on the question and did scrap their plans. But to get into a French university, you basically need to have passed the baccalaureate, which is somewhere between a high school diploma and a college diploma, to put it in our sense. So the parallels have to be handled very carefully because the systems are different.
One more question. Productivity. This is one of the things that's kind of perplexed me, because I had also read somewhere that, I guess maybe this is, and I don't know what the comparisons were exactly, if they were looking at Germany and France or Europe and France, but apparently like productivity there on a worker by worker basis is remarkably high. And this is in light of in light of the fact, this may seem paradoxical, but there are apparently a larger percentage of the population in France is essentially retired, I guess you would say, at an earlier age. Now we know about the 60 to going to the 62, but they were using some numbers like from age 50 or 54 or something like that to like 60 or 65. French workers who were out of the labor force. So I mean, how do you get your arms around that? I mean, it sounds,
Well, a little bit. This is in my opinion, a question of misinformation. We hear that the French workers are revolting because they don't want to have to retirement age from 60 to 62. And I think the subtext is that, boy, those French, they're so lazy, and that's the problem they have. They only work till 60 or 62. As a matter of fact, very few French workers were retiring at 60. That was with much reduced benefits. Most French workers retire at 65 because the percentage of their base pay is much closer to 100. So it's really, the question is going from 65 to 67. Also, some economists point out that countries like Sweden and Germany that have these labor councils, these shop floor elected workers organizations that work with management, the union's been able to wrest great benefits from the employers, but the